of Jena. Has started at the end of 2008 and will be finished by the end of this year. Several of those sub-corpora are already searchable online on our website deutsch-digital.de. I'll show this again at the very end. The other corpus I will show you is the Old Lithuanian Reference Corpus. It covers preserved texts of the oldest stage of Lithuanian, starting in about 1520 with the first transmitted texts and ending about 1800. It covers about 10 million word tokens, and a pilot project covering 550,000 word tokens started in 2012 by international cooperation of the Lithuanian Language Institute or LKI in Vilnius, the Goethe University in Frankfurt, and the University of Pisa in Italy. It makes use of the experiences made with the Old German Reference Corpus due to its cooperation in Frankfurt am Main. So the texts of both corpora are in principle of similar quality. We have both religious and secular texts. We have both prose and poetry, and we have both translated and adapted as well as independently composed texts. The language varies due to diachronic, diatopic, and diastratic differences, and there are also foreign language source texts and foreign language words in the texts. The annotation of those foreign language words is done as similar as possible to the Old German and Old Lithuanian word tokens, and they are comprised in the aforementioned word token numbers. For Old Lithuanian, a balanced choice of the text for the pilot project was made according to the aforementioned qualities. Well, the starting points of the two, of the development of the two corpora was quite unequal. I'll just show you that there's quite a difference in the divergence from the modern language. Namely, Old Lithuanian is considerably closer to modern Lithuanian than Old German is to modern IOO German, and this is not only due to their actual different age. Well, in fact, the invention of the printing press in the 15th century and the spread of written texts that resulted from it resulted in a deceleration of the transformation pace of European literary language, and so the development from Old Lithuanian to modern Lithuanian is rather moderate in comparison, although the spelling differs quite largely. There are many variants. Versus, on the other hand side, the extensive mutations in the vowel system, for just as an example, between Old German and early modern times. Take as an example the reduction of the unstressed vowels to schwa or even to zero. This has quite some impact on the availability of resources. For Old Lithuanian, there's still no historic dictionary of Lithuanian and no Old Lithuanian grammar, although there are some Old Lithuanian dictionaries. So, but in this case, the dictionaries and grammars of modern Lithuanian may be helpful for our work. Whereas for Old German, there are indeed specific dictionaries and grammars. Actually, there are already glossaries, or were already glossaries for every subcorpus, and those glossaries are listing all attested, inflected word forms and relate them to the corresponding lemmata, which, as I will show, was really helpful for us. So the Old Lithuanian Reference Corpus will have as a task to make the basis for compilation of the Lithuanian grammar and Old Lithuanian glossaries, whereas the Old German Reference Corpus will only have to question and to amend the already existing words. Concerning the digital availability of the text, there are just slight differences. For Old German, there was already at least one printed edition per text, digitized by the Titus project in Frankfurt. For Old Lithuanian, we have 10 texts in our pilot project. 6 are already on Titus, 3 are adopted from the Old Lithuanian database at the Lithuanian Language Institute, and for 1 edition is to be prepared. The Titus texts already have a structural annotation. There are chapters and lines marked both for the original document and the edition, and the information can easily can directly Titus website, just to show you an example. You can find it at titus.unifrankfurt.de. And if I click on the text, I can choose Baltic, then Lithuanian, and then here some text by Martinas Mažvydas. So that's the original text that we worked with, that we had as the basis looking like. As the referential text version that all other text versions we use are built on, for the original reference corpus use the digitized edition of the texts. So that was already printed in books as the main layer, and the original text forms and graphical peculiarities are saved for later, because this would have been too much manual work and are only performed by way of example. The Old Lithuanian Reference Corpus, however, uses the digitized edition, for the Lithuanian Reference Corpus, the digitized edition is extended by a version of the original manuscripts or prints, and there's a detailed representation of amendments also done in the project, so the original documents have to be digitized. I'll now present the two courses of action of the two projects, starting with the Old German Reference Corpus. We started for our pre-annotation by digitizing the glossaries for the sub-corpora into an XML format. So on the left, you can now see a part of one of those glossaries. You can see it shows all mentioned word forms and gives the action and attestations in the text. It gives some grammatical, morphological and part of speech information that we could make use of. And on the right hand side, you have the XML version of those dictionaries. So that's actually just the same information, but put into XML tags. So we then link the part of speech and morphological data of the word forms with the word tokens in the texts. So we did this by extracting the data of the glossary files, enriching them with additional part of speech and morphological information that we manually extracted from existing grammars of the Old High German and Old Saxon languages. And as I just said, most glossaries give the attestations with their locations in the text. In many cases, a one-to-one attribution was possible, so that for the manual annotation, no choice between different annotation possibilities was unnecessary. Well, the aim besides was to have a consistent spelling of the lemmata and a consistent modern German translation, so the glossary lemmata were adapted to standard dictionaries of Old High German and Old Saxon. Then we converted the text from titles into the format of ELAN, which is a software having a kind of database or chart structure. Here you can see some, 3 Latin words, because, as I said, we also adopt the foreign language words in the same way as we do adapt the ones of Old German and Lithuanian. And as you can, this works, this does not. You can below see the part of speech, morphological, grammatical, structural, pre-annotation or structural one is below, but you can see the lemma, you can see part of speech and morphological data below. So for the manual annotation, it rests just to amend this information that is already pre-annotated, so the pre-annotated version is already looking very similar to the actual final one. Some ambiguities had to be dissolved, mostly in cases where there were not the actual spaces or locations in the texts delivered from the dictionaries, and a simple syntactical annotation was added. When the manual annotation was finished, or is finished, we add an automated, standardized version of the word tokens. We do this by taking the lemmata and the part of speech and the morphological data, and as we had conveyed the morphological afterwards. It applies expansible dictionaries, and in this case we use two. One was filled with the data of linguistics, which is a morphological analyzer, lemmatized, and tagger of modern Lithuanian by the Lithuanian Language Institute, and this was enriched semi-manually classified data from dictionaries of Old Lithuanian, Slavic loanwords, Old Lithuanian, and Bible names. The other one is a dictionary of the Lithuanian language dictionary, and here we just retrieved data from the data that were actually in the Old Lithuanian corpus. So here you can just get some impression of what Toolbox looks like. So you see it has no chart structure, so the text is on the left, and in the small windows you have the possibility to make some annotational choices. The lemmatization of the word forms in the Old Lithuanian text is, if possible, done automatically, else manually, and standardized word forms are created by that software linguistics from the lemmata part of speech and morphological annotations, so similar to the approach for the German reference corpus. The lemma translation is added using a modern Lithuanian English dictionary. The word tokens were conveyed into a standardized spelling using the consistent changes program, and mainly for the older text we had to make specific rules for every single author because the orthography of the spelling is that diverse. The manual annotation is then done in Toolbox. The texts are joined with the linguistics data. They are disambiguated manually. And as I said, Toolbox has no chart structure, and the amount of annotation layers is restricted, so the data are then transferred into ELAN, like those of the German reference corpus, where there are also the word forms split up into single graphemes, which is also performed for the German reference corpus, and every single grapheme is annotated for special qualities. For example, there are moreover information on multi-word expressions added, quotations are added. Actually, this can also be automated to some extent from titles, because some information on quotations is already in the titles database, and there's information on the glossing of words added. Then the data are conveyed into the English annotation tool in Anto, which I will show afterwards. So here we can annotate the facsimiles of the original documents, and you can select the details of images and link them to the annotation. This is this English annotation tool. Here you can see a text, and there's an addition and glossing, whatever, on the right hand side. So on the right we have now our annotation tool. So we choose this, the word on the left that is explained on the right hand side, and add an annotation below that unfortunately cannot too well be seen. As you can see in the second line of the annotation, there's some expression explained, which is the original shown on top. So the next some pages are very common between the two projects. For example, our tag set. The part of speech and morphological annotation is done using the Deutsch Diakron Digital tag set for Old German, which was constructed by adapting the Tiger morphological annotation scheme for modern German, which itself is based on the Stuttgart Tübingen tag set. This was used as a basis for the creation of the tag set for Old Lithuanian, of course, using some adaptations needed for that language. It always distinguishes between the lemma-specific and the record-specific qualities of word tokens. Lemma-specific being, for example, inflectional classes, record-specific, for example, case and number. And there was qualities, for example, the inflectional class can also differ between the lemma and the record, so we have three different kinds of annotation of morphology in this case. We give the language of the word tokens according to ISO 6393, giving some strangely looking codes. GOH is German Old High, OSX is Old Saxon, OLT will hopefully be Old Lithuanian. It is approved as an official code and that, for example, is Latin. Data are then conveyed into the ANIS database. Their texts are joined with extensive metadata description that is also compiled within the two projects. And yeah, this was developed by the Mittmann Reference Corpus and the Old German Reference Corpus. So there are also similar projects for younger stages of German, as I'll just show you by way of example. And in this database, there's a broad variety of very complex search patterns possible. That you can see as an example below, but we are working on a more comfortable search tool using drop-down menus, so this is more comfortable for linguists. Here we have an example. We look for Guido, who I believe this is in plus an accusative case. The first one precedes the second one precedes the third one, and well, it's in. This is now the case for one single text. So here there's just one result, but of course there are lots of more results in the Old German Reference Corpus of this case that you look for standard, so you have all kinds of spellings of those words that are searched for. This is now the representation in the ANIS database. Here you have just one Latin word on the left, and you can see the manuscript has DM. Well, this is a representation of DM as an abbreviation. The reference text erroneously has DO because it was falsely read, but now, we discovered this falsely read word and changed it to DO, which was originally meant, and we annotated this DO, so it's accusative case instead of the wrongly read ablative case. And yeah, on the right hand side, we have just an example of Old High German word with its annotation. So the manuscript version, the reference text, and the standard versions, the lemma, the translation, the language, then the part of speech annotation of the lemma of the record, and then the annotation, the morphology, the phrase structure, and then some, structural annotation. Okay, so what can we conclude from this? Well, we compare the two approaches, and we can see the work on the Old Lithuanian corpus thus benefits from the course of action that was applied for the Old German Reference Corpus, although various aspects were diverging initially. The Old Lithuanian Reference Corpus can use some data and tools, or can indeed use the digitized data and tools for modern Lithuanian. This approach is actually completely inapplicable for the Old German Reference Corpus, but as we have no glossaries for the Old Lithuanian Reference Corpus, we need an additional adaptive learning annotation tool that can make use of the decisions made by the annotators. We need some special approaches for objectives of the Old Lithuanian Reference Corpus that exceeded those of the Old German Reference Corpus. For example, precise annotation of the facsimiles of the original documents, but however, cooperation has proved advantages and there's more time for the actual philological work remaining. So, thank you very much for your attention, and looking forward to your questions. from the large corpus. Yeah.
I have two short questions. The first one, are your textual data compatible with the TI standard?
No, they are. Yeah, I know TI. I have already worked with it, but actually they are until now not. So if we wanted, we would have to transfer them into that standard. But I'm not that sure whether the database we use is not does not have the possibility. So, but I could look that up and tell you, because I'm not that sure. Maybe it is. Yeah, but that's only for the text in the final database. It might be, actually. I could not definitely say this is not the case.
The second question is whether digitized editions, were there any copyright issues? Use print editions where it's...
Luckily, the printed editions of the old German texts are already, well, the authors are already dead for more than 70 years, so there are no problems with that. Yeah, they have all said that most of the old German texts and glossaries were set up in the 19th and early 20th century, so luckily for that we do not have copyright problems. For the Lithuanian texts, it's in some cases a bit different, but well, for example, there's an edition made by one of the professors that created a problem